Welcome to the sweet side of life, traditional and non-traditional sweeteners. I am Jane Key, registered dietitian and chef with Kettering Health, the Community Outreach Department. Today we're going to talk about why sugar is a concern, what is sugar and where it's found, caloric sweeteners, and then we're also going to talk about non-sugar sweeteners, sugar alcohols, and then ideas to help you for a healthier lifestyle. So, why is sugar a concern? You say, well, what does it really matter? Well, we know that the regular consumption of food and drinks that have added sugar in them can contribute to obesity and then inflammation within our body. And what's inflammation? That's when we get a disturbance in our vessels and our organs that can lead to chronic diseases. We also know that sugar is associated with diabetes. It doesn't cause it, but it can certainly increase your risk for it. High blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, and most definitely tooth decay, cavities come from excessive added sugar. So, sugar is a sweet tasting, it's actually a carbohydrate. Most of the time, sugar is 50% or in that area glucose and 50% fructose. And some people don't really realize that that's the case. So in the table you see there, if you're using brown sugar or just traditional white sugar, or confectioner sugar, or one of these other, the molasses or pure maple syrup, honey as well, all of those break down to about 50% fructose and 50% glucose. And there is a small deviation with that. Some of them have a larger percentage of fructose or glucose, but for the most part, it's 50-50. And so it doesn't really matter what sugar you're consuming, it is about that same breakdown. So naturally occurring sugar, this is what we want to know, that this kind of sugar is a part of the original cell structure of the food. Your body is able to metabolize these sugars because there's fibers often associated with those sugars that helps to slow down the absorption of the sugar. I say it kind of acts as a brake, a B-R-A-K-E, to have those fibers. So take, for example, an apple. It has fiber in the peel or the skin. Contrast that, so this would help to absorb the sugar slower. This sugar is naturally in the makeup of the apple. Contrast that with having a soda that is all added sugar. So the large dose and the quick time that we consume the soda has a greater effect on our body, being from added sugar versus natural. So natural sugars, we want to encourage people because that's a part of overall well-balanced diet. Okay, so naturally occurring sugars, as you'll see in my plate, come from vegetables and fruits, beans, peas, and lentils, and then grains, and also dairy sources. So anytime you consume a dairy source, you're going to have natural sugar in that, all right? So if you use milk, yogurt, something like that, that has natural sugar. But then we can select dairy choices that have added sugar. So there's a dramatic difference between the natural sugar that comes in just dairy milk versus flavored milk that has the added sugar. And I also would like to bring up that dairy alternatives are something we need to watch too. Those are usually nut milks or seed milks, plant-based milks. And oftentimes people assume that they are totally healthy to use, but you really want to become a label reader with those and look at the added sugar grams in those as well. Some of them have more added sugar than others. And then you'll also know that the labels are important to watch for other dairy sources that aren't just the plain yogurt or plain milk that you might consume. Okay, so we're going to flip from the natural sugars, which we know are a part of the cell, part of the food, have fiber, so our body can metabolize those and knows how to deal with them because it's part of a well-balanced diet. Let's define what added sugars are now. These are concentrated sugars that are added to food and beverages. They are added in the processing. That's the key there. Your natural sugars are naturally there. Your added sugars are added in the processing. So they're often in large amounts unhealthy. It contributes to a large amount of calories that can add up. There's actually no nutritional value. When I tell you back to the apple that has nutritional value, a soda does not have nutritional value, it just has sugar in it. So, and then keep in mind that, like I mentioned, that these are all metabolized, meaning your body, the added sugars burns quickly, so it affects your blood sugar level, your insulin level, and affects your body more than the natural sugars. All right? So, sources of added sugar, some of these are obvious to you, but we know that things like, ice cream, cookies, sports drinks are a big place that a lot of people get excessive amount of calories, and a lot of times you don't really realize that. A lot of time water just works for the hydration piece, and we don't need all the sports drinks or the energy drinks, those kind of things too. And then a place that you'll find added sugar is sort of hidden are other packaged condiments, for example. It's really important on your condiments, your barbecue sauces, dressings, other things that your hot sauces, that you take a look at the label and really look at whether it is, how much is naturally there, and that will be just listed under sugar, but then you'll also have the grams of added sugar listed. So that's very important to watch in the condiments. They kind of hide out, so you need to be a smart consumer. Tips for limiting our added sugar. We want to think about choosing the whole unprocessed foods, plant-based. You see how most of this plate grows in the ground? A large percentage of this plate grows in the ground, and this is where we get our fibers. This is where we get our natural sugars. Lean proteins, colorful fruits and vegetables, whole grain, low-fat dairy, heart-healthy fats. You want to limit your processed foods because that's where we acquire a lot of the added sugar, the added fat, and the added salt. Fat, salt, sugar comes in the processed and convenience food. Choose water as much as you can, perhaps low-fat milk that is just plain, unsweetened coffees and teas, those are all great, herbal teas. And then I just like to bring up the sparkling waters are a great alternative if you're a fizzy person, like a little fizz. And this is just an example, but one idea of how we can get some sparkles, some bubbles, but without all the added sugar. And then infusing waters, if you need a little fancy bottle to get yourself excited about infusing waters, and an example would be to put like basil and strawberries into your water. It could be cucumbers, it could be mint, it could be citrus. There's a lot of ways to infuse your water to make it more exciting, okay? All right, a couple things about when we're looking at labels. I mentioned that sugar has a whole lot of names, okay? And you'll see on that the label there on the screen that all the different ways that sugar can be described on an ingredient label. But also it's very important to look at your nutrition facts, and once again to look at total sugar, but then underneath that you will find the added sugar. And that is very helpful if you're trying to really evaluate how much sugar you actually eat in a day's time. You can become a label reader. And this is really important too across the board so that you can not only watch the sugars, but the fats, the sodium, and how much fiber is in the food, because as I mentioned, fiber is very important, okay? All right, so in the 2025 dietary guidelines, there was a recommendation, or is a recommendation, that 10% of your calories maximum should come from sugar. And you might say, what does that really mean? So if you calculate that out, supposing you consume 2,000 calories a day, 10% of that's 200 calories. All right, and so that divides out to using about 50 grams of sugar per day, or the equivalent of 12 teaspoons. The teaspoons are the little guys, remember that. So 12 teaspoons is maximum considered if you consume 2,000 calories. Now keep in mind that 2,000 calories isn't perfect for everybody. Little people are going to consume less calories, so would want to use less added sugar. If you're looking at added sugar on an ingredient label, you can take the added sugar, divide that by 4, and that will give you teaspoons of sugar. So that's kind of a nice little quick calculation to keep in mind there. The other thing that I wanted to say about the sugar grams is the American Heart Association actually has more stringent guidelines for added sugar for females and children. 6 teaspoons, and then for males, it's 9 teaspoons per day. So the American Heart's a little bit more rigid about their guidelines compared to the dietary guidelines. So somewhere we want to fall on that, but many of us in comparison, you'll say, well, how much sugar do most people consume? A lot of people are up in the areas of 25 teaspoons to 30 teaspoons per day. So that's a lot of sugar. So work towards working backwards a little bit, okay? All right, so oftentimes we think caloric sweeteners end in OSE, but the reason that I wanted to show you this slide is so that you see that it actually can be called by different names, and they don't all end in OSE. You know, I always said glucose and fructose. Those are the OSEs, some of them. But you'll find on this list all kinds of different ways that sugar will be signified on a label, or so that you know. If you're looking for a sugar that some people want to know, well, like, what's the best sugar? And there's a lot of myth out there about what sugars to use for glycemic index, for diabetes. But I would just like you to know, if you're looking for the sugar that is least processed, closest to nature, meaning that has not undergone a lot of manufacturing alterations, be to focus on pure honey, all right, or pure maple syrup. Now keep in mind, this is the maple syrup that's extracted from the maple tree. This is not the kind of maple syrup that is corn syrup based as the first ingredient. So pure maple syrup, honey, or molasses is another way to sweeten things. And these are the closest to nature and the least processed. Having said that, please remember that they still have calories in them, right? And so that can add up. So a little bit of honey, a little bit of pure maple syrup, a little bit of molasses can give you that sweet taste in a less processed format, all right? Okay, so let's talk about non-sugar sweeteners. So what is a non-sugar sweetener? They actually were developed for the goal to help control calorie content in food or to help with blood sugar level control. That's what they were designed to do. I would just like to say that there is some issue that has been raised about these non-sugar sweeteners having more effect on people gaining weight. Actually, the World Health Organization just came out with a recommendation that if you are if weight control or weight loss is your goal, that sugar substitutes really are not helping that issue. They actually may be increasing the issues with weight, so we want to be aware of that. Also, sugars and added sugars or sugar substitutes also with the heart disease standpoint too, increased risk for stroke and GI issues, those kind of things. So they're not without issues that we need to think about. The goal here is to reduce the caloric content or to help control blood sugar levels. The, sugar substitutes or non-sugar alternatives are often much, much, much sweeter than sugar, sometimes 200 to 600 or 800 times as sweet as sugar. The human digestive tract cannot break these sugar substitutes down. So that can cause some GI issues for people, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And some of them are man-made and then some of them are actually found in nature. What's the difference in the two? Your man-made ones are going to be some of these with the aspartame, which is NutraSweet, Sweet and Low, which is traditional saccharin or equal. Those are man-made, and then your white sweeteners too that are made from stevia are man-made as well. But you also you see stevia is a plant, a green plant. So that whole leaf stevia in other countries is used as a sweetener. In the United States, we refine it into a powder, and so it's considered to be purified stevia and considered to be safer, okay? Most of the sweeteners are classified as food additives, so they're regulated by the FDA, or they're on the GRAS list, which is generally recognized as safe. I encourage across the board that you watch how much you consume. I mentioned this briefly for several reasons. Heart events have been shown to increase with excessive use of sugar substitutes, as have your risk of certain cancers, and then stroke is also a problem with that. GI disturbances, gas, cramping, bloating can be a problem with the sugar substitutes. And a lot of research is going on now that we want to keep a robust gut microbiome for health, and that perhaps some of these non-sugar sweeteners are creating havoc within the gut health, which then is affecting our overall health. So I just bring those points up to you that we want to be sure that we're conscious of how much of the sugar substitutes we're consuming, because they really are showing in research potential issues that I want you to be aware of. Okay, the FDA has approved this list of sugar substitutes, and the ones that you're going to hear most commonly is what I already showed you, that aspartame, which is the equal, the saccharin, and which is the pink packet, and then sucralose, which is called Splenda for most of us, all right? Stevia leaf extract, that's like your Truvia. Something important to remember with the use of stevia, the purified stevia leaf extract, is often used in combination in sugar substitutes with a bulking agent. Stevia is very, very, very sweet, very fine, so there's a bulking agent added to it. So once again, be a label reader and find out what else is added. If you're picking a stevia substitute, what else is in there? Is there a sugar alcohol in there? Is there dextrose in there? Is there maltodextrin? Something's giving it the bulking agent so that it actually is a powder that you can pour into something, all right? Then we have some sweeteners that are on the GRAS list, generally recognized as safe. I mentioned this before. Monk fruit is one that you'll see more and more. It comes from a fruit, processed from a fruit. This also is a sugar substitute that's going to have certain bulking agents in it too, so you just need to be aware of what you're really consuming. Stevia glucosides, that is the actual leaf. So as I mentioned, in the United States, the leaf of stevia is not approved for use, but the manufactured processed stevia is, and that's where we get the stevia leaf extract. So it's a little bit confusing, and I just want you to be able to be a better consumer, all right? There are non-sugar blends that are used for baking. So a non-sugar blend could be part sugar substitute, part regular sugar that's come together, or it could just be an entire sugar substitute, something like this. And this is a product that I'm going to talk about in just a minute, is a sugar alcohol called erythritol. People use Swerve in baking because it helps the product to brown. You don't really want to bake cookies or cake and not have them brown. So the erythritol will help the browning, all right? It is important to remember that just because you're using something that is low sugar or sugar-free does not mean it's calorie-free. Think about that. So carbohydrates, protein, and fats contribute calories. So you could decrease the carbohydrate part, but if something still has protein or fat in it, your product is going to have calories. So I just like people to understand that low calorie or sugar-free doesn't necessarily mean that the food that you're eating is calorie-free. Sugar alcohols are more apparent now in alternative or lower sugar, sugar-free items. They typically end in OL. So that's an easy way to know if you're dealing with a sugar alcohol. Xylitol, maltitol, mannitol, erythritol, sorbitol. Erythritol is probably one that is people are seeing a lot more as a consumer. They are made from carbohydrates, so it's important to remember that they're not calorie-free. They're lower calorie, but not calorie-free. Sugar alcohols can raise your blood sugar levels, but to a lesser degree than using like table sugar, white sugar, but they still can raise your blood sugar levels. So if you're a diabetic or trying to watch your blood sugar, you would want to be aware of that. Oftentimes your sugar alcohols are found in candy, gum, baked goods, ice cream too. And erythritol, as I mentioned, is used in baked goods to help them brown. That's fine, and that's obviously you want a browned item, but I just want to caution you against portions consumed, okay? Because large portions of the sugar alcohols, as the other non-sugar sweeteners, can increase GI issues like gas, cramping, diarrhea. Oftentimes people can't tolerate it because remember I said your body can't break it down? So that GI issues can be a big problem. Just a little example of that, I had a client once that was given at Valentine's Day, sugar-free heart of chocolates, and the person consumed the whole thing and was literally miserable after that because it was way too much of a dose, quick dose all at once of those sugar alcohols. The body could not digest it properly, and so it resulted in serious GI issues. And a lot of people know that certain sugar substitutes or non-sugar substitutes they can't tolerate. But just keep in mind, as I said, that they're not without issues from numerous health standpoints. All right, so tips for a less sugary lifestyle. It's prudent for all of us to try to decrease our added sugars. Your taste buds will transform if you give them a chance. When we consume sugar, it increases the dopamine in our brain, which is that feel-good neurotransmitter, like, ooh, we feel really good. And it also creates food memories. So sugar is that food that we consume and the brain's like, oh my gosh, I feel really good on this for a while. And then you remember that sugar. So gradually working to decrease the amount of added sugar you eat is probably one of the biggest challenges that a lot of people undergo when they're trying to modify dietary practices. But getting away from all that added sugar, you find that you have increased energy, you feel better, you're less moody. But it does take time to wean back on sugar. So be patient with yourself, but just realize that it is prudent for all of us to decrease our added sugars, and your taste buds will adjust with time. Your brain and your taste buds will adjust, but we have to be patient with that. Using smaller amounts of non-sugar sweeteners, as I mentioned, is a really good idea. They have their place, but for some people, they consume a large amount each day, and we're concerned about long-term health effects of the added sugars as well as the non-sugar sweeteners. All right, so work to decrease both of those. Enjoy seasonal fruits. So much of our eating has focused to a great degree on added sugars that we often forget, or our body is not used to, the fact that fresh fruits can provide that sweet. Right now, think about, we're going into berry season, stone fruit seasons, with the plums and peaches. All those things are beautiful as far as giving the natural sweet without the impact of the added sugar or the non-sugar substitutes. Be a label reader, be able to look at portions and the sugar, salt, fat, fiber, so that you know what you're eating. And also the ingredient list is very important too. Remember, ingredients are in descending order. So if you have sugar, salt, or fat as one of those first 3 and 4 ingredients, that's a big part of that food product. If you're baking, you can use regular sugar and reduce it by 25%, and your product will turn out great, fine. So what does that mean? If something calls for a cup of sugar, I could decrease it to 3/4 of a cup, and my quick bread, cookies, brownies, whatever, will still have the same taste. Enjoy water, infused waters, sparkling waters, unsweet teas. Iced coffees are really in now, but just be cognizant of what's going in that. Hot coffee or iced coffee. The idea of coffee is actually fine to consume. It's just what we do to it often can create a larger amount of calories. So if you use non-dairy or just a dairy product, just know what you're consuming, okay? So that you, and try to shake things up. I'm a huge advocate of the just different ways to use water and infuse it or add some, herbs or fruit or whatever there. Prepare whole, unprocessed foods for meals. Remember, the fewer the ingredients, the closer to nature. Color for health. And our whole goal is to keep you healthy, decrease your risk of the chronic diseases, decrease your risk of inflammation, but also have you enjoy the foods that you consume. And so thank you for your attention. And until we meet again, eat well and be well.